Hello and welcome to the show. This is episode 150 of the Meet the Farmers podcast, and I'm your host, Ben Eagle. Today, I am heading over my county border to Suffolk to meet Dan Brown, who grows wheat, linseed, sugar beet, and potatoes on 600 acres, as well as keeping 44,000 free-range hens for eggs. Dan, welcome to the podcast. How's your week going?
Morning, Ben. How are you? It's a lovely day. I've been spraying this morning. The linseed that you trailed there has been replaced by a crop called hybrid rye.
Oh, okay. You're growing rye now.
Applying growth regulator to it this morning. It was a lovely morning to be out on the sprayer. So pop back to the house to speak to you.
Great. Let's look at your chickens first, because obviously bird flu has been in the news quite a bit recently. Have you been impacted at all this winter?
Yes, we've. I can't remember exactly when, but it's late November we housed them, and we've only let them out last Monday. So the birds have been in the house for 5 months. They were ranging really well before we shut them in. So for the first few days, they were sort of stood there looking at the pot holes, like, what's going on? Come on, open the pot holes. But yeah, they've had to be shut in all winter. I don't think it's a bad thing to shut them in sort of December, January, February, because it's so wet and horrible outside, and they drink out the puddles.
Yeah.
And then you get gut health problems and all sorts of things like that.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't mind shutting them in for that. But when it gets to sort of late April, early May, and they're still shut in and the weather's improving, I think they've had enough and we've had enough. And it's good to get them back out again.
So you're on the Suffolk, Cambridgeshire border.
Yeah.
Tell us about that part of the world.
It's the edge of the fens. So the family farm is in West Suffolk at a place called Kenny Hill, or the area is Burnt Fen. Burnt Fen isn't a village, it's just a sort of area of farmland.
Okay.
There's about 300 acres there, 330, I think. And then about 4 years ago, I won a tender in my own right to take on a farm up the road in Cambridgeshire, called Bulldog Bridge Farm, owned by Cambridgeshire County Council. Because 300 acres wasn't really big enough as an arable farm. We had the chickens, obviously, but I sort of thought it'd be nice to see if I could sort of run a farm in my own right. And I didn't know that Cambridgeshire Council would go for it. I thought they'd probably say, we want to encourage new people into the industry, which is what they used to do with council farms.
Yeah.
But I think the barriers to entry are so high now.
How long have you got that tenancy for?
Another year, 18 months is this harvest and next harvest. So it'll be October 23. It'll be up for renewal. And if they like me and we can agree a deal, then we'll renew for another 5 or 10 years. The initial term was 5 years, which sounds long, but it's not actually that long. I was
going to say, five harvests goes very quickly.
It does go very quickly, and you can't really. I mean, there's lots of things that sort of need doing. There's drainage that needs sorting out, and the house could do some work on it.
Okay.
But 5 years, you think, well, it's not really worth me doing it. If it's a 10-year term, you can sort of do that work because you'll get a lot of the payback yourself.
Before we talk a bit more about you, I just want to talk about Just Farmers. We've had quite a few Just Farmers actually on recently. Which has been good. And Anna Jones's brainchild, of course. And you got involved in the early days.
Yeah, so what happened was there was a bird flu outbreak, and I can't remember if it's 2016 or 2017. And Ben Pike, the media guy at Befrepa, was looking for a farmer to talk to BBC Breakfast about it. And there was this late night WhatsApp conversation. It might have even been on the farming forum or somewhere, some kind of social media or Twitter or something. Will a farmer speak to BBC Breakfast in the morning? And I thought, I could, but then I thought of another couple of farmers who would be better at it. So I suggested them, I think. They couldn't or wouldn't do it. So about 10 o'clock at night, I got this phone call from a researcher saying, can you go on BBC Breakfast in the morning, come and talk to us? Well, I thought I was going to have to drive to Manchester or London or somewhere. But what actually happens is local radio studios have a little sort of camera booth to one side of them. Yep. So I had to drive to Cambridge at 6 a.m. And they wanted me to talk to the Today Show first on Radio 4.
Wow.
Well,
that's in at the deep end.
It wasn't at the deep end. So my first ever media exposure was the Today Show on Radio 4. And I couldn't find the studios because BBC Radio Cambridgeshire used to be in the centre of Cambridge, and Google still thought it was in the centre of Cambridge.
Oh, no.
But they'd moved to this sort of business park in the outskirts. So I was in the middle of Cambridge looking for it. And they said, oh, no, it's not there, because I couldn't get hold of this research because they were so busy. It's not there. You'll just have to pull over in a lay-by and we will FaceTime call you.
Yeah.
So my first ever media exposure was on the Today Show in a lay-by in the middle of Cambridge, sat in my car in the dark at 6 a.m. talking to whoever it was on my phone, because apparently FaceTime is better quality than a phone call.
Yeah.
So we did that. And then I was on with the government chief vet, I remember. And later I saw a clip of video that they'd done. The government chief vet, he was in Brussels, and he was sat in a proper studio with all the shit around and all the lights and screens and stuff flashing. He was talking to the Today Show from there. I was doing it from the car. But that went okay. And then the researcher came back on the line and said, right, now can you find the studios? Because BBC Breakfast want to talk to you in sort of half an hour.
Yeah.
So we worked out where they were, and I drove across Cambridge.
Not stressful at all.
No. And then I got to the studios, and then the producer from the Radio Cambridgeshire breakfast show came out to meet me, all flustered, and was like, "Well, we're broadcasting the breakfast show at the moment, but I'll sit you in this room, and then listen to this earpiece, and when you hear them talk to you from Manchester, just do as they tell you." And then, so that's what they did. Pitch black room with a sort of floodlight in your face.
Yeah.
And off went the producer back to push the buttons on the breakfast show. And I could hear in my ear what was going on, but I couldn't see anything. Then this producer came on, and then I spoke to, I can't remember what her name was. It's Dan Walker, and I can't remember what the other presenter's name was. But I spoke to them and answered the questions. But they could see me because they were looking at a huge screen in the studio, but I couldn't see them.
Nothing.
I was just looking at this floodlight, and behind me on telly was King's College, Cambridge. In this dark room I was sat in, there was just a piece of grey sort of tarpaulin behind me.
Okay. So
they obviously put all the nice pictures in. Afterwards, it was fairly easy. I mean, the questions, they weren't trying to catch me out or anything.
Yeah.
They were gentle with me. And then this producer bustled back in and said, right, well, now Radio 5 wants to talk to you. So go to this room next door, and Nicky Campbell will come on the line. So then I went to the room next door, and he gave me the radio equipment and some more headphones. And then he said, there is an expenses form you can fill out on your way out, if you like. And disappeared back to his breakfast show. So then Nicky Campbell came on the line, and we had a nice chat. By then, that was my third interview, and I was kind of settling into it then.
Okay. So who's next?
So that was like the best chat we had. That's because I sort of got my bearings a bit. Anyway, so then Nicky Campbell disappeared off the line, and they come back on and say, thank you very much, off you go. So I went back out into the lobby. There was no one around. The expenses form wasn't there. I couldn't get in any further into the building because I could see them producing the radio show.
Okay.
But that was all locked.
Yep.
So there was no way. I just left the building, drove home for breakfast, and by breakfast time I was back at home. But it went everywhere. I was getting messages from people they'd heard me on Radio 1.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Down in Cornwall.
Wow.
Like, oh, you're on Radio 1 at lunchtime, or you're on BBC Cornwall. So obviously they sent all this footage out to people because I didn't know how any of it worked. And they just sort of, then ITV rang me and can you go on the lunchtime news?
On the same day?
On the same day, yeah. That was for ITV Anglia.
Wow.
So I sort of started with the biggest possible shows. And then over the next 2 or 3 days, it trickled down to like smaller and smaller. I think I did Channel 5 or, it got down to sort of...
Talk about a crash course.
Yeah, so that was my first media exposure. And in the end, that AI outbreak wasn't that bad. I think there were 3 or 4 farms. We had a shut-in for a while.
Yep.
And it just went away. I think Anna must have seen it or something like that because she got in touch with me.
Oh, she got in touch with you. Right.
I can't remember how it works. Yeah. Or was she heavily promoting it on social media? and then I saw it. But anyway, she saw my video clips and was like, yeah, you need to come along. This would be great to have you coming along. So I did it the wrong way around, really. I got thrown into the deep end and then went and did some training, which is the way I approach most things.
Let's go back a bit. You grew up on a dairy farm.
That's right.
Yeah, that was, I assume, the family farm in Suffolk.
Yeah, so I think in the 70s, it was about 500 odd acres, of which some was rented. The family bought the farm in 1912.
Okay.
And they moved from sort of between Ely and Cambridge on the A10 there. And my great-grandfather bought this farm. And he had 3 sons and a daughter. And the 3 sons were farmers, but my dad's dad, he loved engineering more. So he did things like they didn't have mains electric, so he set up this system where he had a generator and some batteries.
Yeah,
a bit like now you have sort of grid storage. He set something up like that, so he could charge the batteries up, and then he could run the farmhouse and the milking parlour for a bit at night. So that was his real love. So the Second World War came along, and the eldest 2 didn't have to go and fight because it was a reserved occupation.
Yep.
The 3rd son did have to go.
Okay.
And I think most of the farm workers had to go.
Wow.
So my granddad had to go and fight. So he sort of got ahead of the game and volunteered in the RAF because I think he thought that would be an engineering thing. And he did end up as an aircraft fitter.
Okay.
So he was trained on Typhoons, which is a sort of like a Spitfire, but a later, more powerful version.
Yep.
And I think he was supposed to go over shortly after D-Day to establish an airfield, but then his orders got changed and he got sent to the Azores.
What?
Doing anti-submarine patrols. So I think he had a pretty good war, to be honest.
Wow. I was going to say, there are stories you hear and stories you hear. That is.
So he was sunning himself in the Azores, mending these anti-submarine aeroplanes. And then after the war, he knew that he didn't want to come back and be a farmer. So he set up a car garage in Shillington in Bedfordshire.
Okay.
Which people were starting to have their own cars then. So he sort of hit that just right as the masses got their first car. And then he did that until the mid-70s when he died of a heart attack. And he would have been in his, I'm not sure, late 50s.
Oh, wow.
He wasn't particularly old. But my dad was a mad keen farmer. And so he'd gone off to college and ended up down in Kent working on a dairy farm.
Okay.
And then my granddad's 2 brothers, the old uncles, were your classic bachelor farmers that never married, never really left the farm, apart from to go to things like the Suffolk show and the Royal show to show their cows.
Yeah.
So they'd go and stay over in a tent or whatever to show cows for a bit. That was their social life, essentially. So they had no one to leave the farm to. So then they approached my dad and said, would you like to come and work on the farm with a view to taking it on?
Okay.
And then there was, my dad's got a brother and sister and they had to be paid out. And there was all as you can imagine, even, back then farmland values in the late 80s and the mid 90s were nothing like they are now. So it's a lot easier to sort out, but it still took a lot of doing, I think.
Still the joys of succession. Yeah.
So that's a convoluted tale of how we got to where we are. And all that time it was a dairy farm. They supplied a local dairy in Mildenhall before I was born. And then that shut. So then they moved to Dairy Crest at Fenstanton, near Cambridge. But by the late 90s, early 2000s, it was obvious that 60 cows was not enough.
Yeah.
And there was no money in milk.
Yeah.
And so in about 2002, Dad decided to sell the herd. The 2 old uncles had long died.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to milk cows. I'd already gone off to University of East Anglia to do business management.
Yep.
So he sold the herd. And since then, Dairy Crest have shut that dairy. So I think even if we hadn't done it, our hand would have been forced, I think.
It happened at some point.
There's no dairy farming around this area anymore.
Yeah.
Some on the Suffolk coast, North Norfolk, it's a long way away.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and actually, because the Gold Cup winner this year, which is like the biggest accolade in dairy farming, was won by an Essex dairy farmer. But he's the only He's the only farmer left within the M25.
Oh, is he?
The only dairy farmer left within the M25. Yeah.
Yeah, we used to go to. I remember being taken as a boy to this sort of awards evening.
Yeah.
Every sort of about May, June time, and we'd often win this cup for butterfat.
Okay.
The high butter. They're all different awards, but for some reason, our herd seemed to, whether it was deliberate or accidental, I'm not sure, but it often and there was sort of us and this other farm that sort of traded. I think it was butterfat, and there's some other trophy.
Okay.
And we just traded them back and forth for years, and the inscriptions on the. So you'd get to take it home and sort of like it was the FA Cup or something, put it on the mantelpiece, and then you'd have to give it back, and the next year it would go to the other farm, and it would be back and forth. But all of that's gone now. I don't think hardly any of those herds from that Norfolk and Suffolk competition are still going.
Yeah, no, it's a completely different picture in the East now, isn't it? So, like you said, you went to UEA to study business. I'm interested in sort of your mindset, sort of then your choice to study business and what you were thinking about doing afterwards. Were you thinking about going back into farming,
There isn't really a local young farmers club around here. So I've never followed what seems to me the traditional route of go to young farmers, go to Harper or Cirencester, get yourself a Schoffel gilet and some tweed and do all that. So I knew I didn't want to be a dairy farmer, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. University wasn't that expensive then. I think it was maybe $1,000 a year.
So, it was back then, wasn't it? Yeah.
So plus your accommodation and things. And then I did okay at school. I got A's and B's in GCSE, and I think I didn't work hard enough at A level, and I got B's and C's, which was enough to go to UEA to do business management while I thought about what to do, I think.
Yeah.
And I recommend it. I do recommend going to university because it's good to get away from home. But I don't know if I recommend it if you're going to end up with £50,000 of debt and don't know what you're going to do at the end of it. I think I ended up with about £9,000 or £10,000 worth of student debt after 3 years.
Yeah.
Which you could pay off, not too difficult to pay that off.
Exactly.
And
it's a different thing now.
Yeah. And I may well have, a lot of I went to a 40th birthday party last weekend of a lot of my friends from that course.
Yep.
So we've all stayed in touch. And one of them works for Visa doing something. Who knows what he does, but he gets paid an awful lot more than I do.
Yeah, it's one of those mysterious jobs. They earn a fortune. You have no idea what they do.
He investigates new markets for Visa.
Okay.
So countries that don't use Visa very much.
Right.
Because there's Visa debit and Visa credit.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're not going to talk about Visa, but this is the sort of thing people fell into. Another one is a head of training.
Yeah.
If your company wants training on something, he'll sort that out.
Yeah.
So
I love that though. Again about and I've similar with my sort of student days from people who I've kept in touch with as well. They end up doing such different things. And that's it's just I love talking about it.
And they think it's mental that I end up on the telly to talk about chickens. And what on earth is going on? How have you ended up keeping chickens? Well, I suppose that bit's obvious, and ending up on BBC Breakfast occasionally. and it is. So my course wasn't a waste of time because I probably could have gone on to do something like that if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But at the time, we didn't know. But when I was doing A-levels, I was doing A-levels business and economics, and you had to do a module where you took a business and you got all of the sort of financial information, and you did a case study on how to improve it, I think it was.
Okay.
And me and a friend did this, and you think, well, firstly, you need to find a business that you can get all the financial information for, which is not that easy.
It's not.
So in the back of
that age,
there was this company called John Bowler's Eggs, who would send you an information pack with all the cash flows to build a chicken shed, supply John Bowler's, and it was like a franchise, like a McDonald's franchise.
Okay.
So John Bowler built you a shed, John Bowler sold you feed and pullets, and you sent your eggs back to him.
Yep.
All this financial information was there. So we did our project. We got 82% for it, which I think was an A.
Very good.
And then forgot all about it and went off to university and didn't give chickens a second thought, really, until university was finished. And Dad said he'd sold the dairy herd, and he said, "Do you remember that project you did they're still advertising the Farmers Weekly. Should we have a proper look at it and see if we can put a chicken shed on the farm? So we went on their open day, but it was a franchise model and they locked you in for 4 or 5 years. Our neighbour was keeping chickens and she suggested going with a company called Dean's Countryside, who would advise you on how to build a chicken shed and then leave you to get on with it, which is more, we were already livestock farmers. We didn't really want too much interference. So we went with Dean's Countryside, which has now become Noble Foods. And we built a 12,000 bird chicken shed in 2004, which was about the average size then for free range. And then we supplied them for quite a long time, but they're a big corporate business. They bought goo puddings and lots of other things. And in about 2014, we were approached by a company called Bird Brothers near Swineshead in Bedfordshire. And they basically tempted us to supply them with more money. So we went. and in 2015, we built a second chicken shed.
Yes. Yeah.
So it did take us a long. We didn't rush things. It took 11 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I was quite intrigued at that. So what happened? What happened 11 years later?
Between,
well, I'm guessing it's quite a few years before it's in the planning and deciding to put this up.
Well, some people seem to, at the time, they seemed to build a chicken shed sort of every other year.
Yeah.
People started going for it. But we had a load of redundant cow sheds from the dairy.
Of course.
Day. We'd had a beef herd for a few years, but that had been wound down. So BQP, the pig company, were offering you sort of a deal where you converted cow sheds and put pigs in.
Yep.
So we did that from 2008
Right.
onwards. Put all the plastic walling in, had 800 pigs, but you were sent piglets at sort of 7 kilos, you fattened them to 110, and it never really ventilated properly. There was always muck in the pens.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a purpose-designed pig shed.
Yeah.
And after about 8 years of shoveling muck out every morning, we'd had enough.
Yeah.
And they were lovely when they were piglets. And actually, if you had a sick pig and took it out and put it in a sick pen, they stayed in the sick pen for the rest of the batch. So you'd have half a dozen of these sort of recovering pigs that you'd get to know, and that was really nice. But the 800 pigs in a big shed just squealing at each other. And then you have to load lorries on sort of 30 Celsius June days.
Yeah. So you were thinking, chickens is better here.
It's not for everyone. Let's put it like that.
Let's say that.
It's not for everyone, but lots of people love doing it, so it's fine.
Yeah,
but not everyone likes every job, do they? So
which is important. Diversity is the spice of life.
Yeah, and so we'd converted the shed fairly cheaply, and the equipment inside it could be sold on. So we sold off the pig equipment and built another chicken shed. And that was the other thing, because we'd been asked if we would build another chicken shed. The bank was starting to say, well, hang on, there's a salmonella. I don't know how the bank manager knew, but he knew about salmonella, and he knew there was a risk that it could pass from pigs to chickens.
Okay.
Which there is. So he's quite well informed.
I have to say that is good. That is good bank manager knowledge.
Yeah.
I have to say.
And he was sort of saying, what are you going to do to mitigate that risk? And we said, well, we're gonna get out of pigs and concentrate on chickens.
And he says, fair enough.
So that was early 2016. No, I think summer 2016 the birds were housed by the time it was built.
Okay.
And then we had a couple of reasonably good years, and it's been sort of declining ever since, really. In terms of egg prices falling. Things were really good in 2015-ish.
Yeah.
And lots of farmers built sheds.
Yeah.
I can't really point the finger because we did it as well.
There's been quite a bit of activity on social media and in the media as well about cost of reduction in relation to the egg price. What's going on with all that at the moment? What's the latest?
At the start of COVID, which is March 2020, feed prices started to sort of really climb. And that has only accelerated with the Russian-Ukraine war. So probably March 2020, you might have been paying around £250 a tonne for a sort of standard layers ration.
Yeah.
And now you would be around 400. Yeah. And I've seen quotes as high as £450 a tonne for some of the really high spec starter rations. Electricity has gone from, I think we were paying 12p a unit then, and our latest quote was mid-30s.
Yeah,
so that's tripled. Labour's gone up a bit. Vet bills and things keep rising. Finance is the same because that's a fixed thing for us, but for some people, interest rates are rising. We were probably getting around 90 pence a dozen average for eggs, which was around break even in March 2020. But the costs have risen now to around £1.30 a dozen to produce, maybe £1.40 a dozen.
Blimey.
And the egg price has gone up, but only to around £1. It's gone up 10p. So we're still 30 to 40p short of where we need to be. And that's been the sort of bedrock of the Befrepa campaign, is producers need 40p. And that only really gets you back to break even.
Yeah.
But it's been a thing that's been creeping up. A lot of us will have bought feed forwards. So you know how many tons of feed you want. You contract that for 12 months, say, or 6 months forwards. But all of those contracts are starting to finish now. I mean, not many people have bought forward through to this Christmas, for example. So everyone is starting to feel the feed price inflation.
Yeah.
You could pretend it wasn't happening for 6 months or 12 months because you were on an old price, but now everyone's going to these new prices. We've just renewed our electricity this month, so we were okay, but that's just taken a massive jump. So everyone now is feeling the pressure of these cost increases, and the retailers know that there were too many eggs around a year or two ago because too many of us have built sheds. The packing companies, the middlemen, had encouraged people to build sheds backed by the retailers. And the retailers know there's too many eggs around and they are exploiting it ruthlessly. And they've signed long-term deals for eggs. They're saying that they put out these sort of, you've probably seen these statements about how we're looking at how we can support the farmer.
Oh, yeah.
But it's our job to protect the consumer. And you think, well, you know how to support the farmer. You go to your computer and you change the price in the eggs for the eggs that you pay, and you press the button and you start paying it. And that's the farmer's problem solved. He doesn't need anything else from you. He doesn't need you to hold his hand, or she. We mill our own feed, so we can put all our own wheat into our mill.
I was going to say you're producing most of your own, but obviously you're still buying in quite a few inputs.
We're buying soya and soya oil and limestone and things. And I mean, soya oil, March 2020, that's about £550 a tonne.
I was going to say, because it's
now 1,600. So that's tripled.
Because I know the South Americans have had, Brazilians especially, they've all had, there's been poor harvest down there. So it'd be interesting to see what happens to soya going up as well. And
I think the Ukraine war has meant that no sunflowers are coming from Ukraine.
Just mad.
Which then means that soya oil is a replacement for sunflower oil in a lot of things.
Yeah. And the other one, which again, I don't know how many people know about this, but is palm oil as well in Indonesia. That's been banned exports down there, which again is putting massive pressure on. And as same, the Canadians had a terrible rape harvest last summer as well. So that's again putting extra pressure on. It's
and there's less oilseed rape grown because of the neonicotinoid ban, isn't there? So
it's a general perfect storm.
Yeah. So I can't remember where we were now.
Nor can I.
Milling our own feed.
Here we are.
So we can put our own wheat into the mill, which protects your cash flow. But the problem is, I still have to grow the wheat. We still have to pay the input cost for the wheat, and the fertilizer's gone up for next year.
That's all going up as well, yeah.
And you should be honest with yourself and say, look, this wheat that I'm milling this week, I would have sold that for £320 a tonne if I was selling it this week.
Yeah.
And I did this little cost exercise the other day, like a stress test, where I thought, if I put the soybeans in, the soya oil, limestone, electricity, and everything into my poultry spreadsheet, how much would I have to give the wheat to the chickens to break even across the whole farm?
Yeah, because that was generally one of my questions for you.
I was thinking,
how do you do it?
Maybe the chickens could afford to pay £150 a tonne for wheat.
Yeah.
And no, I got down to £80 a tonne for the wheat, and the whole farm still wasn't breaking even. So home milling is a good thing, but it isn't the answer to all of your problems.
Yeah.
Because you rob Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah.
And in the end, you run out of cash. You can't grow wheat for sort of £60 a tonne anymore. You haven't been able to for years.
Exactly.
So it is still a loss. But I feel for those poultry farmers who are just poultry farmers and have no sort of arable to go alongside.
Yeah.
It must be very difficult.
So obviously it is, for all those reasons and more, it's quite a difficult time at the moment. So I mean,
it's been a very grumpy and miserable.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, isn't it?
So what's your plan in terms of growth? Stay the same, or any changes going on?
We definitely won't be growing the poultry at the moment. Our 2004 shed is probably ready to be upgraded inside. It's still pretty good, but it's had 15 flocks through it now.
Okay.
You could probably do another 5 flocks through there, but at some point, all of that equipment inside will need replacing.
Yep.
And perhaps when that needs replacing, you would then think, well, if the egg market was good, you might put a multi-tier system inside, so you'd keep a few more hens. But at the moment, I don't think there's any demand for extra chickens, so we won't be doing anything.
Yeah.
We'll be making do amend with that shed, I think, and just patching it up every year.
Yeah.
Arable wise, I don't think where we are on the fens, we're surrounded by 2 huge companies. You've got a company called G's who grow a lot of the lettuces for Tesco.
G's Fresh, yeah.
And you've got A.L. Lee and Sons, which is a big farming company that grows sort of 2,000 or 3,000 acres of potatoes.
Yep.
I think Lee's would be maybe 12,000 or 13,000 acres, and G's would be probably 25,000 acres on about 4 continents. They've got African farms and Spanish farms. So just across the road from where I'm talking to you, there's 500 acres, literally 40 meters from my kitchen. That went up for sale earlier this year, and that was bought by G's. And where I used to live at the home farm, the 200 acres came up for sale, again, 30 meters from my kitchen window, and that was bought by Lee's. So that, and they have land around Ely that they're building houses on and things. So
it's the story you're seeing everywhere at the moment. It's fascinating what's happening undercover in the countryside, on a small scale locally, but when you look at it on a bigger picture, there's big change going on at the moment.
I farm 3 blocks of land. There's a 5-mile straight piece of road up to Littleport, where the Littleport roundabout is, which goes off to Downham Market.
Yep. And
I farm 3 blocks, which used to be 3 individual council farms.
Okay.
So they've been amalgamated and let to one tenant, in this case me, but Cambridgeshire Council owns them.
Yeah.
So they won't be sold unless there's a change of policy to the 2 big farms. But other than that, all the little family farms along that 5-mile road, there's one left, apart from me, the council farmer, and then there's one chap who owns a few hundred acres. All of the rest of it, which is thousands of acres going back either side of the road, is owned by 2 farms, and they've just bought everything.
Yeah.
And they're really good farms. The really annoying thing is everything they farm looks great.
Yeah.
And they do a great job. They must have a massive appetite for hard work, because they're out there all hours with huge kit, growing thousands of acres of potatoes, green beans, celery, lettuces. What else do they grow between them? You name it, they'll grow it. Onions. I don't think there's much opportunity for growth on the arable side. But then if you'd asked me 3 years ago, would we have expanded from our 300-acre home farm to taking on this other farm? I'd have said probably not.
Yeah.
You just never know what will pop up. Do you?
Never know what's around the corner. And so one last question. Transition and moving away from BPS, how's all that impacting on you?
Well, that's sort of one reason we went into milling our own chicken feed, because we're then not paying the transport off the farm and the transport back. So the wheat we were selling to a mill and the chicken feed we were buying back, the transport both ways is now coming into our business. We've driven as much cost as we can out of keeping chickens, I think. In terms of arable, a few years ago, we bought a Claydon strip till drill.
Okay.
So we plough far less. We grow sugar beet ourselves. And then potatoes, I have a joint venture with a neighbour on some, and some other land is rented out to a grower. They still need to plough for their potatoes at the moment. Although one of those growers has now stopped ploughing. I think we're all trying to find ways to grow things with less and for less. We've since gone from the strip till on the Claydon to a 0-till kit on it, which has saved even more fuel. Although I have got a couple of fields this year that should have been subsoiled It's a steep learning curve when you try and do that.
That's what everyone says.
There's a couple of fields which have laid too wet all winter, and they really needed subsoiling. But I sort of thought we could get away with it, and we didn't.
Yeah. Learning curve.
So yeah, it's a steep learning curve. But as fast as we've driven those costs out, I think the price of diesel's gone up. So it's a good job we were doing it.
Yeah.
We haven't gone in for any environmental schemes really, because they don't seem to pay that well. And when you're in an area where you can grow potatoes and sugar beet, sugar beet doesn't pay brilliantly, but British Sugar do seem to be working on paying more for that.
Okay.
And we do need we need sort of 1,300 tons a year of wheat for the chickens.
Yeah.
And so if we put 20% of our land into an environmental scheme, we would then have to buy that in, because we only grow about 1,100 to 1,200 tons ourselves, maybe a bit more. In a good year, it'd be more, but in a bad year, it'd be less. So we don't really want to cut our output and then have to buy too many cereals in, really. It's one of those things, you see on Twitter, a lot of people have got a lot of ideas about dealing with BPS, but I don't know if anyone exactly knows what to do. That's what we've done, but
there's still a few years to go.
Could well be wrong.
It's just like a drip at the moment.
Yeah.
Let's start to wrap this up. We always finish the show with the same two questions, which I'm going to ask you now. The first is, if you have a message for the public, any message, what would it be?
The message to the public would be, I think there's been really good engagement actually over the last few years with farmers, and people see you doing media stuff and they always tell you how much they enjoyed it, and they ask lots of questions. I think they are interested.
Yeah.
So yeah, the message to the public would be, we're not trying to poison you. We are trying to grow the best food and produce the best crops that we can. Prices are going to have to go up, unfortunately, but if they go up a small amount now, I think, pork and eggs will keep coming. If the retailers don't put the prices up now, we'll end up with big supply shortages, and then the prices will go up a lot more.
Yeah.
So it's not much fun, but I think if you could hassle your retailers to pay cost of production now, it will be cheaper in the long run.
And finally, a message for your fellow farmers.
Try and let the public onto your farms. It's not very easy when you're a chicken farmer because of biosecurity and bird flu lockdowns. Farmers probably do the opposite to what the pressure groups do, whereas they think we're trying to poison them. We all think the public hate us, but they don't, and they are quite interested. So treat them as your friends. Tell them why you do what you do. And so our chicken sheds are large. We've got 44,000 birds in 3 sheds, and they're free range, and it's large scale free range.
Yep.
But if you bring, and I've had sort of a vegan come over, and if you bring people and show them it, they're taken aback by the scale of it. But when you explain why it works like this, that they can go outside every day, we've got a flock at the moment that's 74 weeks old and it's still got all its feathers. Well, if sometimes you have them, they lose all their feathers. But a good sign that the bird is happy is that it's well feathered.
Yep.
So if you can sort of talk them through it and explain, look,
it's pretty easy to tell with chickens.
It is quite easy to tell. And, we eat, 30 million eggs a day in the UK?
Yeah.
So realistically, you can't just have birds scratching around farmyards to produce eggs. You do have to do it in a sort of industrial way, as kindly as you can. So if you can engage with people, I think the more the better.
We'll leave it there and that wide-ranging discussion. Which is going to
Thank you very much.
It's going to be a fun edit.
I've just rambled on and on and on there. Hopefully
no, it's great.
Cut that into something useful.
Oh, I'm sure it will be. But no, thank you so much for coming on the show. And are you going to the Suffolk show this year?
Probably, yes. We've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, so they'll probably want to go. I'm going to the Pig and Poultry Fair on Tuesday.
Nice.
But Suffolk show will be for fun.
Yes, absolutely.
Pig and Poultry Fair is for work, yeah.
Super. Have fun with that. Thank you very much for listening. Please do subscribe to the show if you haven't already, so you never miss a future episode. Next time, I will be heading to Gloucestershire and I'll be speaking to first-generation farmer Matt Elliott. So I hope you can join me then. But until then, have a great week.